Some people can walk away from everyone they know. No explanation, no guilt, no 3 a.m. regret. And that terrifies people. Not because it's rare, because somewhere, quietly, they wish they could do it too. We call these people cold, damaged, emotionally unavailable. We reach for a diagnosis before we ask a harder question. What if they're not broken? What if they just learned something the rest of us never did? There's a name for what they have. And by the time we get there, the way you see yourself is going to shift in a way that doesn't come apart easily. Here's where it starts. Most people stay in relationships they should have left years ago. Not from love, not from loyalty really, from guilt. From a lesson they absorbed so early they can't even locate when it happened. That walking away makes you the problem. That leaving is the same thing as failing. So they stay, and every day they do, something drains out of them. Quietly. No dramatic announcement, just a slow, low-grade leak. It doesn't announce itself, but over time, it costs everything. The person who cuts people off and never feels guilty, they don't have that leak. And the reason is not what you think. This is where most people get it completely wrong. When psychology talks about people who detach easily, they almost always land on one word: avoidant, afraid of intimacy, emotionally closed, running before they can be left. That's a real pattern, but it's not the only one. And collapsing them together is where the whole conversation goes wrong. There's a second kind of person who walks away. And this one isn't running from connection. They're responding to something precise. An internal system so finely calibrated that by the time they leave, the grief is already done. The concept is called high boundary clarity. That's the mechanism. That's what's running underneath the behavior that everyone around them misreads as coldness. Here's what it actually looks like in practice. Most people experience a boundary being crossed the way you experience a slow gas leak. You don't notice it until you're already dizzy. The discomfort builds. It's explained away, gets minimized. And by the time they finally act, they're deep in the wreckage of their own hesitation. The person with high boundary clarity doesn't wait that long. They pick up the signal early. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet internal note. This is not working. And then they do something most people can't. They act on it. Without waiting for permission, without needing the other person to agree. By the time they say goodbye, they've already said it 100 times inside themselves. The emotional processing happened before the exit. That's why there's no guilt on the other side. Not because they didn't care, because they already grieved. And now here's the part that changes everything. This doesn't come from easy childhoods. High boundary clarity almost always develops in one of two environments. The first, a home where emotional boundaries were violated consistently, where the child had to learn early what safety felt like versus what danger felt like, because their nervous system depended on that distinction. The second, a home of deep inconsistency. A parent who was warm one day, gone the next, present, then absent, loving, then cold. Both of those environments produce the same adaptation. A child who becomes an expert at reading the room, at knowing, fast and without drama, when something is off. That is not pathology. That is a survival intelligence that calculates faster than most people's conscious minds can follow. Now picture this. A woman, call her Selena, 31, lives alone by choice. She ended a 2-year relationship in one conversation. No chaos, no aftermath, just clarity. People in her life say the same thing. I don't understand how you just do that. What they didn't see was the process. Every night for months, she had been running the numbers, quietly, alone, asking herself the same question in different forms. Is this person adding to my life or subtracting from it? By the time she had the conversation, the answer had been settled for a long time. The words were just paperwork. That's not coldness. That's efficiency. And those two things look identical from the outside. This is where it becomes dangerous. And this is the part no one tells you. The culture we live in measures relationships by how long they last, not by what they cost, not by what they return. Just longevity. So when someone ends something cleanly, no ceremony, no extended mourning, we assume something's wrong with them. We call it unavailable. We call it avoidant. We call it damage. What we're actually watching, most of the time, is someone who refuses to confuse loyalty with self-erasure. Someone who decided somewhere along the way that guilt is not a good enough reason to stay. That's not broken. That's rare. But here's what's also true, and this part matters. The same precision that allows someone to exit without guilt can also cut off something else. The discomfort that isn't a warning sign, the friction that is just two people figuring each other out. The ordinary necessary awkwardness of early connection, where you don't know someone yet and they don't know you, and it feels uncertain because it is. High boundary clarity can filter out genuine threats. It can also filter out genuine possibility. This is not a flaw to be ashamed of, it's a dial that can be adjusted, but only if you can see it clearly first. The question worth asking, before every exit, is this: is this signal real? Is this discomfort telling me something true? Or is this just the feeling of being known by someone and not quite being ready for it? Most people never reach this level of self-interrogation. The person with high boundary clarity already has the hardest part: the sensitivity, the signal, the early warning system most people spend their whole lives trying to build. What they're adding is discernment, the ability to ask, is this a door worth closing or a threshold worth crossing? That distinction changes everything. And it brings us back to where this started. The person who can cut everyone off and never feel guilty is not someone who felt nothing. They are someone who felt everything. Early, quietly, alone, and finished. You weren't watching coldness. You were watching a completed process. Most people never learn to finish. They carry the grief of every relationship they should have ended, open, unresolved, slowly draining. The person you thought was broken learned how to close the loop. They just did it somewhere you couldn't see. That's not damage. That's a form of freedom most people don't know how to reach. When did you first recognize this in yourself, or someone close to you? Drop it in the comments. I want to know which part of this hit closest to home. And if this is the kind of content that makes you see yourself differently, subscribe. We go deeper every week on Mind Beneath.